really the essence of MAGA, the essence of America First, really is this relationship between trade and the hollowed out middle class. Can you connect the dots for our listeners? How is it that tariffs play a role here?
Well, thank you for having me on, Jack. And I was actually just listening to the podcasting between Tucker and Lighthizer. It's fantastic. I encourage all your listeners to give that a listen. And one of the main topics that they are hitting is what you just opened with in this question is about the hollowing out of the American middle class. We were this middle class country for so long. 80% of the country considered themselves middle class to some extent. Obviously there were differences in some wealth and in some income, but for the most part, we were all largely part of this very strong, very healthy middle class, which was, very much a strong foundation of our republic and our entire constitutional system. And the eroding of that middle class has led to America's decline. It's led to our decline culturally, economically, spiritually, militarily, every sense of the word decline it has been a part of. And one of the main tools used to chip away at that prosperity has been the tool of trade. It's been these trade imbalances that the United States has been running for quite some time that we no longer produce. We only import and we import and we buy on credit. And it's been a way to hollow out the prosperity that was developed over generations in this country, make us less secure, make us weaker, make us more dependent, and just destroy the very foundation of this country. And obviously they were talking about things like innovation, a whole litany of other secondary and tertiary effects. But my recent article, beyond just overall praising the new direction that this administration is taking to tariffs, was also proposing other ways to utilize the tariff, which is an incredibly powerful tool to level the playing field in other ways, such as environmental concerns. And I think, we're seeing the reciprocity return to the table in terms of discussions in terms of tariffs. We're seeing tariffs being used as a means to extract geopolitical concessions. I also think tariffs can be used very effectively to combat the issue of pollution and environmental concerns that we see in places like China and India and elsewhere, and how to level the playing field. We are a country that respects our great American landscape, all of our natural beauty and our natural history, and we don't necessarily sacrifice that on the altar of GDP, but a way to even out the playing field as it relates to countries like China and how they abuse not only the environment, but their workers and a whole litany of other categories is to impose a pollution tariff. If they're going to have a certain percentage of emissions, we should have a tariff on their goods that corresponds to it. And I think this would be a way to incentivize China to implement more, modern environmental protections like the United States and most of the Western developed world does. And they can't simply produce in disgusting conditions, horrible for the environment, as a means to undercut our industry, undercut our manufacturers, and import massive amounts of cheap labor, which are also ultimately hurting the middle class.
And in a sense, Gavin, though, isn't this also perpetuated by so many of these Wall Streeters who are actually at the same time that they'll be talking about climate change or BlackRock, we're so concerned with climate change, we want carbon credits, we want this and that in the United States, that those will be the same firms that are going and investing their capital in foreign direct investment into those same slave conditions, slave wages, factories that which by the way I visited when I was in China, and seen the actual conditions there, with the suicide nets outside of Foxconn, where they make your iPhones. And the idea is this is the underpinning of the globalist system. The underpinning of the globalist system is the mistreatment of the Chinese Lao Baixing, the average person in China. The Lao Baixing, by the way, means the old 100 names. I know people hear that phrase on War Room and around, but that's what it actually means. And it's just talking about the masses, like the average person in China. They're exploited, but it's not done so just because of by accident or something, or done with the ignorance of Wall Street. No. Wall Street actually encourages the CCP to do this. Why? To undercut those very same, as you say, Gavin, the American manufacturers that actually have the patriotism and the nationalism to care about our country and our workers. 1 minute till the break.
Amen. Well said. And this is really what it's about. It's them virtue signaling on Wall Street, at their parties, at their cocktail receptions, but not wanting to actually support policies like a pollution tariff that would actually solve issues as it pertains to the environment and protect American industries and American workers from this unfair foreign competition. Competition that you rightly point out is akin in some cases to chattel slavery, the way they treat some of these workers and the working conditions and the environmental conditions. It's atrocious. And that is the end result of this hyper globalism, this hyper free trade, open market-ism. It's returning to a very dark place in humanity where they're chasing GDP above all else, and the conditions of the people, the conditions of the worker, the conditions of the environment be damned. And we don't have to live like that. We don't have to accept that. We can return to an America where we protect our workers, protect our industries, and protect our environment all at the same time. A pollution tariff is one way to do that.
Gavin, I want to get into a little bit more of this, talking about the Chinese Communist Party, talking about tariffs and how all of this is completely interconnected. But one of the ways that I can tell people to look at it is go look at those images of Shanghai, the beautiful downtown there, Lujiazui, and all of the towering, glittering skyscrapers, right? You know, and then go or Shenzhen or any of the other cities that have just been blown up. And people say, oh, this is all because of the Chinese Communist Party. No, it's because of the wealth transfer of the American people to the Chinese Communist Party. Why do you think China looks like that? And Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, et cetera, all look the way that they do. It's because of wealth transfer. And don't even get me started on the Rust Belt and the way that those cities look completely blown out. They look like they lost a war when no invader has ever even come there since the British in 1812. Gavin, what is going on?
Well, look, you're explaining a phenomenon that is at the heart of MAGA, and it's something that President Trump has eloquently discussed for 30, 40 years. You could go back to these old news clips of him in the 80s and the 70s, always talking about how we're getting ripped off, how our money's getting squandered overseas, and we're not getting a return on it. And you see, not just as it comes to China, many people look at, oh, they have these new high-speed rail, their cities are very modern, their infrastructure is modern. Yes, that is the wealth transfer of the United States in action. It's not due to the genius necessarily of the CCP. They are cunning, but it's mostly because they know how to rip us off, not because they're actually creating that wealth themselves. They're stealing it from the United States. And you look at Europe in the same kind of situation. They are stealing from us in a different way. We're protecting them. We're defending them. We're subsidizing their defense budgets for decades and allowing them to keep up their welfare state, allowing them to build their high-speed rails and all these other fun projects that lefties here domestically like to talk about. But you cannot have that sort of infrastructure. You can't have these sort of beautiful cities. You can't have the return of this industry and these quality jobs, good paying jobs, and the incomes and the middle class lifestyle that match them if you continue down this path of hyperglobalization where we're constantly sending our wealth abroad, either in foolish foreign conflicts or in stupid trade deals that gut the heart of this country, the heartland, the Midwest, Appalachia, the Rust Belt, you name it, all these different areas, even the American inner cities, as you mentioned, from Detroit to Baltimore to parts of New York, wherever it may be. They are all being gutted because our elites have decided almost unanimously that they would much rather make a short-term cheap profit by extracting all the remaining wealth of our country rather than building a nation founded on something more than just GDP, founded on some sort of continuity, some sort of common identity, culture, and values. And instead of building that, which was the basis of our country, they've gone the opposite way and said, no, open borders, open markets, completely free trade. We're going to be the world's policeman. We're going to send all of our money, wealth, and treasure overseas, and we have nothing to show for it.